started recording. Last week I pressed record and it didn't start recording at all. All right, so welcome to the session, guys. Today we'll be adding a button to an app. Now, some of you have concerns that you've missed the first couple of sessions and maybe you're too far behind, but you can still sit into this session and still gain a lot, actually. You gain more in this session than the other two sessions we did combined, so good you're here. All right, so today we're going to be learning about classes and objects. So Kotlin is an object-oriented programming language. It's the modern way of writing programs. I'm not going to go into the history of it all and blah blah blah, but this is how we do it these days. We use objects to write programs that are modular, easily maintained, and also robust. Okay, so did we lose someone? Okay, so again, I'll be going through this session, just skipping through. I won't be reading through each code lab step word by word, simply because it would take us an absolute eternity. But I'll just be giving you the lowdown of what's happening. So we have this app. It's a dice roller app, and we want to add a button where people can tap that button to roll the dice and then have different outcomes for that. So in the end, the app should look something like this. Now, to do that, we obviously need to add a button, and we also need to add some code to make that button work. Because in the last session, if you were here, we added images and text to a layout, but we never got to make them do anything. They were just there. Okay, so for this session, we're going to use both the online playground and Android Studio in some of the code labs. You are going to need to know, now this is where missing the first one, the first session becomes a hindrance, but I will explain anything you might not understand. So we need that, and we'll be learning how to generate random numbers. We're going to create, make those numbers represent a dice, create a dice class, and create an instance of that class. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so in the first session we talked about functions. Is there anyone here who needs me to explain what a function is? Just say yes in the chat. Okay, so a function is a part of a program that does a specific task. So let's use like a real life example. The function of a jacket is to keep you warm. So it has that's a bad analogy. So a function just does a specific thing. You can tell it to, you basically divide up the tasks you want to achieve and make a function, each function do one of those tasks. So maybe add a number, that will be the purpose of that function. We're also going to be look at variables again. A variable, in the recording I should be uploading shortly. A variable is basically, you say, for example, you have a variable that stores a number. That's like taking that number, putting it in a box, and then giving that box a name. So take the number 5, put it in a box, and then give that box a name. Say maybe that 5 represents someone's age, so you name that box age. That's what a variable is. In Kotlin, we declare variables using the keyword val or var, var. So you get the difference of these two later on, but for now we're going to be using val mostly. Actually, most of your programming work, you're going to be using val instead of var. Okay, so inside our main function, functions are the same for any programming language. Java, Python, JavaScript, functions are the same, but the only difference is how we write them. In JavaScript, we write them as fun also, but then in how do you call it? In Java, we would write it in a different way. We'd write also in a different way in C++. So it's the same concept across the board. Actually, learning a programming language, once you've learned one, it's all about just changing the syntax as you go on. Okay, so we are going to declare a variable called dice range in our main function here. And then we are going to give that dice range a value of am I back? Did you guys hear any of that conversation?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, but you didn't hear the conversation I had earlier.
No, we didn't.
Okay, thank God. All right, so in the, I was saying we can give a variable a value. We can say give it 1. You can see my screen as well? No, you can't.
No.
Share that again. Share that again. Okay, now?
Not yet.
Okay, give it a second. How about now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, good. So I'm saying we could give a variable a value of so we needed to have a range of between a six-sided die. Dot six.
Mic check. Are you still sharing your screen? Okay, it's now getting work.
Yeah. Sorry, network doesn't help that I keep getting calls. Okay, so I'm saying we want ours to have a range of between 1 and 6. Now, the beauty of Kotlin, if you've tried doing this in Java or a different language, you might find that putting a range Kotlin just simplifies that, and all we have to do is give it that range. Put two dots between you get what I mean. Okay, so next we need to create another variable called random number. And then we shall assign. Now we're going to use our dice range to give random number a value. So random number will be equal to dice range dot random. Now what I've done here is I have called the function random. Kotlin has classes built in that help us do things quick and easier. So say if I want to get the square root of a number, I do not have to create a class and a function and go through all that work of doing that again. They've provided some of those for us. And one of those methods is the random method. It basically picks a random integer from anything. So what we've done is we've given it a range to pick a random integer from, and that random number that it returns when it's done running will be the value of random number. Have I lost you guys?
We can actually hear you.
Okay, good. All right, so now let's print out the next. Let's print out the result. Print ln, and then what's the text we're saying? Random number is I'm just winging it. Number. Okay, so what I have typed here in the code editor is I wanted to say random number is
I can't hear you. You're breaking.
Network then. I'll say when you want to print out a string, but then also include a variable in that string. Usually there's a lot more ways to do it. I don't want to go into the syntax of other languages, but in Kotlin, it's also, again, further simplified. You just put the $sign and open some curly braces and then put the name of that variable. Return for. If I run it again, it should be a different number. So it will keep doing that, but then it will never exceed It will never exceed 1. It will never go below 1 or exceed 6. That's the random function. Great. Now let's start creating a class. So like I said, a class, think of a class as a template for anything. You and I, we are members, or we are instances of the class human. So in our DNA, it's dictated that we have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose and mouth. So we have inherited those traits from the class human. Same thing applies to a car. The class car, it has to have an engine, some wheels, seats, and all those things. That's what makes a car a car. But they can look different. They can have different purposes and shapes and all that. But underneath, they're basically a car. That's what a class is. So in programming, we use classes to store data, and by doing this, we make our apps as modular as possible. By modular, I mean we can take parts away from the program without it breaking. We can add parts to it without it breaking. Also, we don't have to repeat our code multiple times to achieve the same goal. Also, we use classes to protect data. Data protection is key in object-oriented programming. Okay, so in our playground, I'm just going to clear all this. In our playground, we are going to create our first class. So a class lives outside any. Never mind that. So we'll create a class called dice. This is how we create a class in Kotlin. We use the keyword class and then give it a name, and then open curly braces. Now inside our class, we now give it class variables. So now here we're using var. So we're going to give a var size equals. Did they? Yeah, they gave it 1.6. So we use var here because we know that we're going to change the number of sides. In Kotlin, when you declare a variable as val, its value will never change after it's declared. But then when it's a var, it can be changed. So we know that we could have a 4-sided dice, 6, 10, 12, really any number we want. Okay, so now that we've created a class, we can now use this class to create more instances of dice. We can create multiple dice. So I can have val, say, 4 sides, and make it a dice equals dice. I can also have another dice called 6 sides, and it is also a different dice. For now, they would be what we call, they'd be identical, but we'll see how to differentiate them in a bit. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Use what the first dice. Okay, let's print the sides of the dice. Print then my first dice. Side. So now you see we've been able to access an attribute of the dice to Let's hope that works. Yeah, it works. So we've been able to get the number of sides of each dice. We can also be able to set that value later on. Okay, so inside classes, we can also have functions. Yeah, we can also have functions. So we'll just call one role. Remember, a function has the function declaration, which is fun, and then the name of the function role. Some normal brackets, parentheses, where you put the arguments, which are things that need to be fed into the function. Please, if you are not, let me check the chat. If you are not understanding anything at all at any point, please let me know in the chat. Okay, so we've created a function for rolling the dice. So now let's make it do its job. Remember the last code that we wrote with the random number? We're going to use that code here. I'm just going to copy and paste. And inside that function, there's also a different variable. So you can see, it can get a bit confusing. So inside the roll function, we wanted to roll a random number. So inside it, we said val random number is equal to any number between 1 and 6. So now we want to roll the dice. So now we can in fact roll the dice. They want us to print this. I'm just kind of going through the contents more today. No, roll is not an inbuilt function. It's a custom one. The only for any Kotlin program, the main function is the only one that is a must. Or we can also import from other libraries. We'll see in Android. We don't have the main function in Android. Yeah, I know it's weird. We don't have the main function in Android, but we do have imports. So if I wanted to use a different class, I'd have to import that library. We'll see all that in a bit. Okay, so we've done that. We've created the function inside the class, and then we want to, now we have to call that function. We've created remember up here in the main function, we've created a dice called my first dice. Now we want to roll that dice. How we do that is we call the roll function, which is inside the dice class. My first dice dot roll. So it will roll the dice, and then it will, inside the roll function, it will print for us the result. So you see two numbers. So it has rolled, and the upper number is the one that we want. Actually, let me comment out that, and then we only have that. Now it's 5. So you see how it works. So now, because we've created a dice function, every single die that we create from here onwards will have the roll function. So we don't have to rewrite that function over and over and over again. It's in one place. It's in the DNA of the object. Okay, so next. Okay, so right now what we're doing is we are printing the result of the dice roll. But then that's not very useful in itself. Oh, did we lose? and then they were 2. Okay, so I would say using the print is not very useful in itself. What we want to do instead is return that value so that we can use it elsewhere in our program. So our function, we need to modify it and give it a return type. So function role in JavaScript and Java, you first you give the return type in the declaration. So it would be, hang on a minute, it would be, let's see if I can still remember Java. Anyways, you would put you'd put, say, void, and then the name of the function, or int, then the name of the function. In Kotlin, it's a bit different. We use a colon and then give it the return type. And notice that we're using a capital I for the int. So now the return type is int, and we would get an error if we ran this because we haven't returned anything. So let us return what? Random number. So now our row function returns the random number. Okay. 27 minutes. Up here, we're also doing something that is not advisable. Let's put the dice roll in its own variable. So val dice roll equals my first dice dot roll. So now let's print out this question. There's a question. What's the importance of it being before the curly braces? It's the way the Kotlin syntax is written. Like I said, okay, I'm going to use Java because I am mainly a Java guy. So just quickly down here, I'm going to type down a Java function. So let's say this function is an int, a public, and it's a public function. So it would be public int roll, right? And then it would look like that. But then for Kotlin, it's a bit backwards, and this is something I have actually struggled with when it comes to declaring classes and variables in Kotlin. You just have to think that it's backwards. So this is how it would look in Java, but in Kotlin, it's the other way around. It's the way they've written it. I don't know why they just did. There's probably some clever reason why. I just don't know it right now. Okay, so what else are we doing? We are returning. Okay, so we put that in a variable. So we're going to say my first dice has, by the way, is it, when it's 1, is it a die, or do we just call it dice? I mean, has
actually dice is when it's 1, then die when it's in plural.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, so my first dice has, and then notice how I'm putting the variable in there. My first dice dot sides. So you can put the variable in there, and you can also call an attribute in there. I think you can even do math in there. I'll try that out later. And has rolled, and then we put in our dice roll. What's it called? Yeah, dice roll. Yeah, that's it. Done. Hey, errors. I got this one though. Oh, there we go. Has 6 sides and it has rolled a 2. Great. Moving on. Now we want to change the number of sides of the die, because as per now, when we look here, it's hard coded as 6. So we can only have a dice can only ever have 6 sides. But we want to change that. We can change that from outside, but then no, hold on. I'm completely talking about the wrong thing. Our roll function can only ever roll between 1 and 6, regardless of the number of sides that our dice is declared to be having. It works now because we have 6 as our number of sides, but what if we have 12? It would still be going between 1 and 6, and yet we want it to be going between 1 and 12. So we need to change that as well. So what we do, we replace that 6 in the random number variable with sides. Was that clear?
No, that wasn't clear at all.
I've been accused of explaining simple stuff in a way that is difficult to understand. Okay, so right now, this random number variable inside our row function, whenever we call it, say we have changed the number of sides to 20, a 20-sided dice, and we run our code which tells it to roll the dice. It will have 20 sides, but then each time we roll, it will never go beyond 6. So our code is already broken on that front. It will never go beyond 6, because in our random function, we've told it to search between 1 and 6 only. What we want to do is see this variable up here, the sides variable. Each dice has a different number of sides. We'll see how to change that in a bit. Each dice has a different number of sides, and each time we roll, we want it to roll for the full range. So instead of telling the random number to look between 1 and 6, we want to tell it to look between 1 and the number of sides. So we replace the 6 down here with sides. Is it a bit clearer?
Yeah.
Okay, so now when I roll this, before it was going between 1 and 6, and now look, it has rolled a 9, it has rolled a 10, and 18, which is great. Nice. Okay.
No, but if you're communicating something, we cannot hear you.
Okay, I am back, but
Yeah.
not for long. I have to take out something real quick. So let's finish this code lab as quickly as possible. And then we take a short break of, I don't know, 10 minutes. Is 10 minutes too long? Okay, so now we want to customize our dice class. As of now, our dice comes with whatever we've put as the number of sides, but we want to be able to change that each time we create a new instance of the dice. So we need to change our definition, our class definition up here to accept an integer. So dice, we open parentheses and then put a variable there. We call it number, call it num sides. And then that variable is of type int. Again, this is how it's written in Kotlin. A bit confusing, I know. That also means that we do not need this code, this number, this size anymore. We can just directly take in this. We can directly take in the number of sites that was passed in. So one of the things that you do when you want to make your code cleaner, they call it clean code. In our role function, notice how there is a lot of code, and a lot of it is redundant. We could remove this one line and simply do the return up here. Yeah, we can do the return up here, and we do not need that variable even. So the function row will return a random number between 1 and the number of sides. So that way it's a lot shorter, a bit more difficult to read if you're still new, but as you look at a lot more code, it starts making a lot more sense. And you can say, oh, okay, this function does this. So, oh yeah, the val, we don't need the val because now that's redundant. Let's just go back a bit. The val was there to store a variable. The variable was there to store this value here, the value returned between 1 and the number of sides. But then, why don't we just do the math directly in the return statement instead of first storing it somewhere and then returning it? We could just, I want to say, we could just do away with all that, and then we return. Now we're going against what we were doing earlier, which was giving data names and storing them in variables. We're just returning the numbers. So it's easier to read. It takes less time. Okay, it's hard to read if you're new, but then easier as you look at more code. So we don't need to store it in a variable anymore. We just return it directly. And you see a lot of functions being written like that, instead of first creating variables and variables and variables, and then you have hundreds of variables in your program and you can't keep track of which one is which. Because you'll find yourself in a situation where you've declared sides, something representing number of sides many times. So in Java, in the old days, what I would do is I'd have a different name for the argument. I'd have a different name for the argument of a function, and then I'd have to slightly modify it for a different variable inside, and it gets hard to keep track of which is which. So it's just easier to keep it cleaner. Okay, so that's one of the ways you can do this. Another way is, what other way are they saying? Delete the dice roll and just, okay. So again, we already have a roll function here. We can call that function directly in our print statement instead of storing it in this variable. So we don't need that. So we can just say my first dice dot roll. So again, we've removed one more variable that was just there taking up space. And now our code can run. There we go, it works. Again, like I said, at the end of each code lab, there's solution code that helps you go through all the things. It helps you compare with your own code. So if you missed something small, just go through line by line and see what's different. What's the difference? Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to skip through all these, and then we move on to. Should I sign in? Okay, now we're going to go to Android Studio and implement what we've learned in an actual app. Okay, so this is basic setup of an app. We will not be going through it right now because I already have it set up. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just get rid of the progress I made. I really should have created another one. Time. Never had enough of it. Okay, so it's taking its time.
Or maybe you can use what you have.
No, yeah, I'm just going to use what I have. I'm just going to delete a button and something on the text view. Okay, so we set up the app. Quite straightforward here. You can just copy and paste this. You will have a different save location, and you'll also have a different package name. Now, feel free to change that package name to whatever you want for your app. Just keep it with the convention of com.something.something.something. But then again, you can also have something completely different. Okay, so the app has started. Let's get rid of that and that. The Android Studio. Android Studio is a power-hungry app, and I'm running that together with the Zoom, which is also trying to keep up with Chrome. So it's going to be slow going. I'll be explaining while it warms up. Okay, so in our how do you call it? In our Android Studio project, we will open the layout file. The layout file, usually when you create a new project, it opens the main activity class and the layout file, which is usually activity_main.xml, depending on what you chose while creating the app. Usually, wow, okay. Things keep changing in Android Studio. Usually, never mind that. So in our XML file, which is the layout file, the XML file holds the app layout. It's the one that is responsible for drawing stuff on the screen. And then the main activity is the class, and it's the activity. Activities are what enable the apps to do things. It's the logic of the app, if that makes sense. Let me just close down some more things, hoping that it can it will help out and make it easier on my machine. This is the problem with Android Studio for a lot of people. Just too power hungry. And the video, I don't know if you can see that in the screen I'm sharing.
Not yet.
Oh, it's static. Hold on. Visual. Oh, you can't see my other. Hold on. Let me put it here. Screen share. Okay. There we go. So you see, the recording is live. Just add a thumbnail, and then we will be good. And then I'll make it public. Has it woken up yet? I think it has. This is embarrassing.
Yeah.
I'm saying this is very embarrassing. Okay, so pretend we're doing this on the actual studio. What we're going to do, if it was open, is that we would drag a button from the palette here. Just drag it and drop it down somewhere there. And last week, like I said, we have views and view groups. A view group is usually a container where you put views. Everything in Android on screen is called a view. So that's why you hear text view, image view. What other view is there? Let's look at it. Recycler view, scroll view. Everything is pretty much a view, except for an edit text, which is a text box that people can edit. That's called an edit text. But they're all views. So view groups are the parents and views are the children. And you can nest them as many as you want. Not advisable, but you can. And we're using the parent here we're using is the constraint layout. And last week I talked about constraints, which is basically just saying this button should always be to the left of this other button or to the bottom of this other image view. That's what it does. And basically in this first one, we're just creating the constraints. Has it woken up fully? No, it hasn't.
No.
Close that. Let me see what else I can close. Okay, close Photoshop. no, it really doesn't like that. Okay, those two are closed. So you see, when you're using Android Studio, my best practice is just when I get up and turn on the computer is I just open it up and let it warm up. Maybe I even go do something else for could even be up to an hour before I come and touch Studio, because it's just that hard on the system. I've had people who are using MacBooks with 16 GB RAM saying they're on the brink. You know, it takes up 10 GB of their RAM. So I wonder when they're going to make a Studio Lite. Okay, so this second one, we're going to change the text of the button to, let's pretend I'm actually doing it. We're going to change the text on the button from just button to roll, because it's the button we're going to use to roll the dice. So in our attributes pane, which is on the very right-hand side, it's right here. You can see my cursor. Usually, it's easier to just search for whatever attribute you want to use, because there are a lot and they vary. The list changes from component to component. So what I do is I just search in this text, the search bar up here, and type the name, and it will show up. Just type text, and you see that text box there, and where the cursor is, and change it to row. Again, like last week, we don't want to be using hard-coded strings for reasons I mentioned last week. It's just not good for accessibility, translation, and all that. So we extract a string resource. You're going to be doing a lot of that. And we change the text size to 36. And we change that text to 1. Now, one thing I wanted to point out as I was going through this is in this code lab, it's showing us a different version of Android Studio, an older version. What happens is in the attributes pane, they sometimes add and remove a lot of the attributes. So in this version of Android, the one that they use to make this code lab, there are two text fields. There are two text attributes. One, the normal text, and another one that has a little spanner next to it. Now, what that does is when you are creating your app, and say it's a text field that will be empty at first, but it's a text field that will be empty at first, but you still want to work on it, add constraints, resize it, and all that. But you don't want it to show up in your app. What you would do in the old days is use this text attribute, the one with the spanner, and type your text there. So what happens is in Android Studio, in your design view, you'll be able to see whatever text is there. But when you run the app, it will not appear there because you don't want it to appear there yet. Is that confusing?
Yeah, it's a bit confusing. You're saying the text. You're saying the text attribute with the, what is it called? What have you called it?
Spanner.
Remind me.
With the spanner. So I was saying that in the latest version of Android Studio, at least the one I have installed right now, the version of it with the spanner is not there. So sometimes you're going to be going through these code labs and you'll find some things have been specified, but then the way of doing things has changed since in in the in the present. So just keep that in mind. So don't be thrown off by this, because you could literally spend an hour on this number 6 and wondering where that text that text attribute is. So just keep that in mind when you're going through these code labs. Things change. This attribute panel keeps on changing all the time. So nothing is ever set in stone. Which is why I'm not going to go back and explain in depth what. Let me go back and do it. That's bad practice. So there are two texts. In the old days, there were two text attributes. One, just plain text, called plain text. The other one had a little spanner next to it. So the one that is normal, the normal one without the spanner, if you put some text in that field, it will show up both in your design and when you run the app. But then if you don't want that the text that you're using to test, maybe like I said, you want to design it and style it in a certain way, and you want to see how the style looks, but you do not want to see it when you run the app. You would put whatever dummy text in the second text attribute, the one with the spanner. Is that a bit clearer?
Yeah, it's now clear.
Okay. Okay. Now activities. We've been talking about layouts, and more layouts, but Android also has activities. Now, activities is where the layout is drawn. So right now, if you're holding a phone, you say on WhatsApp, you are in an activity. When you open a chat, that's a different activity. So apps will often have more than one activity, and each of it does something else. So think of each page on your app as a different activity. Sometimes you'll see later on that it's not necessarily a different activity, it's the same activity, but something we call fragments. We'll talk about fragments later on. So in our app, now this is where this is going to hurt me breathe a lot. Please work. Please work. Okay, great. It has worked. So your app, usually when you create a new project, it will come with one activity. It's usually called the main activity. And you see here in the code lab, they tell you where exactly it is, but usually it's also open. So when you open your activity at first, you're going to see your package name at the top, and then some import statements, and then a class. The way Android is built, it doesn't have a main function, but it just has classes. So everything is a class. The main activity is a class, and so on and so forth. This is freezing again. Okay, so let's break it down. The class. So we created a class in our last code lab. This one was created for us. So the class here is called main activity, and you see those two no, I was going to say two dots. That column, means main activity extends app compat activity. Now, app compat activity is a different class that has a lot of the stuff that you want for your app built in. So it inherits a lot of those attributes. We'll talk about later on why it's app compat activity, why it has to extend. It extends to inherit those attributes, those characteristics of the of an app compat activity, and then you customize it. Say, how do I put this? Say, for example, you buy fabric. Yeah, let's use fabric. And you're making the African print thing, kitenge, a kitenge shirt or dress or whatever. When you take that fabric, think of that fabric as the app compat activity. Now, what you're going to do is cut that up and make it into a nice piece of clothing, and that's your main activity. So, in essence, you've extended. Have I made sense with that explanation?
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, so that's what it is. So the big fabric is app compat activity. When you cut it up and shape it into your own dress or shirt, you've extended it, and now it's your shirt, but it was from that piece of clothing, the big one, the fabric. Next, see, there is no main activity, and yet in a lot of programming languages, you need a main function. So there's no main function in an activity in Android. Instead, we have an activity called onCreate. We'll learn more about activity life cycles later on, I'm sure. But each time your app is launched, the onCreate method is called. So we have several methods. Should I go through this? Let me just list them down, but don't feel overwhelmed by them. There's onCreate, onResume, onStart, onRestart, onDestroy. I might have missed one, but those are functions. Those are functions that we've inherited from app compat activity or the activity, because app compat activity also extends activity. So you can see how this is a complex web of things. All that complexity is obscure to us, so we don't need to know that app compat activity extended whatever else it did. We just need to know how to use it. So when your app is open for the first time, onCreate is called, and you'll notice that there is override, which is a keyword. We'll learn about that later. The rest of the onCreate method, and I'm saying method, and I'm saying method, not function, and yet it's declared override fun. So method and function, we use those terms interchangeably in programming. A lot of times when I say function, I mean method. When I say method, I mean function. So we mostly use method though. So we're saying the onCreate method. So instead of a main function, we have an onCreate function here. So the rest of that function or method will go to set up our main activity. So you see this line, step content view, the one I've highlighted. It states set content view r.layout.activity_main. That's where we import our layout from. So we've designed it over there, but up until this point, our activity doesn't know it exists. And we could very well change this to any other layout we want. The next thing you'll notice you'll have to do is set up auto imports. I haven't done this personally because a lot of times it's by default set up for me. So each time, say I want to use a class from a different library, I'd have to first call an import, say import math dot blah 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 blah. And that can get tedious, knowing what you have to import all the time. But you might not know what library exactly you want to import from. but you know the method you want to import. So you can just go ahead and start creating that method, and Android Studio will, a lot of the times, just go ahead and import it for you automatically. And also when you've imported and say you've deleted that function, you want to clean up your code a bit more, you'd have to go back. You don't have to go back and delete the import. Android Studio will also clean that up for you. But here's how you do it. Okay. I think we'll make it to the end of this code lab though.
Yeah, you can reach to the end.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to make it. There's only 2 more steps. Okay, so there's something I want to show. It's called a toast message. We want in this step we're going to say if that button is tapped, we want to display a message on the bottom of the screen saying dice roll. Now that message is called a toast message. Hang on, let me share my phone screen and you see what a toast looks like. Share screen. Start now. Okay, great. So let's see. Should we return on the end? In no, hold on. What I want is actually at the bottom when it comes to looking for my build number. In about phone, build number. See, when I tap this and it tells me no need, you are already a developer. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I can see.
Yeah, that is a toast message. So it's a quick way of letting people know what's happening in your app. Maybe if there's a failure, or say a lot of times when I send a tweet, I can just type it in and then close the Twitter app. That tweet will maybe have not been sent, and then I'll get a toast at the bottom. Tweet sent or failed to send. It's a quick way of letting your users know what's going on with your app without being too intrusive. There's another one called a snack bar. It's also at the bottom. We'll see that later on. But now let me go back and stop sharing my screen. All right, so back here, we want our app to display that toast message. Hopefully it works. Hang on. Someone wants to join. Imagine that. Today I'm destined to have one person at a time. How cool is that? So while you're on your way out, someone else wants to join. Okay, so now we created a button in our app. Let's see if this thing has started working already. Yes, it has. It's still a bit slow, but it has basically started working again. So we want that button to display that message. But as per now, our app has no way of knowing what to do with that button. When you tap that button, it does nothing. It does 0. So what we want to do is let our activity know about that button. Let's reference that button. So in our onCreate method, after we've called our layout, please work. Okay, that's failed. After our in our onCreate method, we're going to call this we are going to call this, hold on. Hi Sheila, how are you doing? Nice for you to join us. Okay, so we want to now reference that button. Fine. You've been ignored. Unmute, please. Yeah, mute, Sheila, mute. Okay, here. So I'm just going to paste that code. I'm just going to paste that code. It still doesn't want to play nice. Okay, so how we reference our button is, first we need to give our button an ID. So in activity, in our XML file, when we select that button, we need to give it an ID. Okay, so you see up here at the top, the ID, while looking for stuff can be tough in the attributes panel, the ID will always be the topmost thing unless you search for something. So by default, they've given us a button. Android will always give each view, each element you drag to the design an ID. So if I dragged another button, it would give it button 2. And the IDs are basically just integers. They're really long integers. And that's how Android identifies each of these. All right, so we want to now find that button. So I am just going to type that in instead. So we're going to create a new variable called val role button. You do need to store each of your elements in variables, and it is of type button. Again, the column denotes a button. Changes on your screen. Okay, stop share, and then I will reshare. Okay, let's share that screen. And also, if you're watching this recording on YouTube, sorry about the weirdness. You are sharing your screen. New share. Share screen. Share. Okay, great. So now you can see it.
Yeah.
Now you can't. Oh, someone created Gofundme page for me. Okay, so we will call it, we'll call that variable role button, and it's of type button. Now, how we infer type in Kotlin is with the colon. So if it was an int, it would be role button colon int. But now it's a button. There are data types apart from the usual, string, int, long, float. For Android, there are special ones that relate to the screen elements. So there's buttons, there's text views, there's image views, recycler views. They all have their own data types created by the Android framework. So that's what, if you ever wondered what's different with Kotlin for Android and normal Kotlin for everything else, or Java for Android and Java for everything else, that's where now the differences start coming in. So it's of type button, and it is now this text, this next bit you're going to be using a lot in your apps, called find view by ID. Find view by ID. It's a method that looks at all the IDs that have been generated and then picks the element that has your ID. So r dot id dot button. Because if we look here in our layout, the ID for our button is just button. So there we go. We've created that. That error should be gone. Okay, great. So now that we've added that button, remember how I said Android Studio imports automatically? Well, it kind of didn't for me here. Because my machine is really slow right now, or whatever reason. But this usually happens, and when you click there and put the cursor on that red spot, you usually get the option to fix it. So sometimes the Android kind of knows what you were trying to do, but it didn't do it. So here it says, it's giving us a question, android.widget.button, and then Alt Enter. Now, if I press Alt Enter on my keyboard, it will go ahead and import that for me. So now the error is gone. So now our app knows, now we can use this variable to do stuff with that button. When something happens to that button, we can use this variable to make the app do stuff. In this case, we are going to create a toast. So now, even if we've now referenced it and our activity knows about our button, it still does nothing. We need to tell it to do something. And what we use in Android is what we call listeners. And this listener we're going to use is called the on-click listener. It's a method that listens for taps on the screen. So if the user taps an area on the screen where the button is, the button has been tapped, and therefore we should do something. Roll button dot set on click listener, and then we open parentheses. You'll notice sometimes if your PC is fast enough, you notice suggestions coming, and there's sometimes different versions of the same method. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to know which one you want to use, but generally after using it a few times, you'll be very keen to know which one has. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. So there's set on click listener, and there are two versions of it. The one we want is the lower one. We could also use the first one, but then it's a bit different code. It's a lot more code. This way is just more concise. Okay, now that we've set up our app to listen, what have we though? From syntax on click listener. There we go. Now that we've set up our app to listen for clicks, for clicks on our button to be listened to, we can now create our toast. Now, toast, also a variable. You'll see how you can get rid of this. Val toast is of type toast, right? No. Toast equals toast. This code, you're going to also be seeing a lot of it. It's the same for pretty much all the toasts you're going to make. Toast will make text. This. For now, just whatever you're not understanding, all will be revealed. Toast dot length short. Okay, so I'll enter to import that. I will set that up later on. Now the errors are gone. Okay, now let me explain what I've just typed here. What I've just typed here, I've created a variable called toast, and how you create a toast is toast.makeText. That's the method you call, and then this is the context. We'll talk more about context later, and then comma dice rolls. That's the actual message that the user will see when the toast is displayed, and finally toast.length short. Now that's the duration of your toast. That's how long you want it to stay on the screen. You want it to pop up for 2 seconds or a bit longer. Yeah, I think it's 2 and 5 seconds. I think I'm not so sure. Great, so that's done now. Now our toast is ready. Now we just need to show it. So we call toast dot show, and boom. So now each time that button is clicked, this toast will be shown. Any questions, guys?
There are so many questions. About the toast that make text. What is there is something you mentioned? Where does toast fall?
Where does toast
fall? Like, for example, we can say maybe toast is a function or what? So what is?
Is a class. It's one of those classes that have been. You see, when you hover over any, my network is unstable. When you hover over any, chill, I'll get you in a moment. When you hover over any class, notice how the class names are by default start with a capital letter. So that's how you know something is a class in programming in general, Java and Kotlin at least. The classes start with capital letters, and that's a given. So while we don't see the declaration of that class, you can tell it's a class by that. So when you hover, it will give you the details of that class. So basically, we've created an object. Remember how we created the dice object in our first code lab? We created a toast object here now. So now somewhere in the code, you can get to it. Actually, let me see. Edit source. So you see now this is the toast class that I was talking about. There's a class toast, and then inside that toast class, there's an integer variable for length short, for length long. There is also a method, a function called make text. Let me see if I can find it. Make text. Here it is. Public static toast make text. It's actually a. Is it another function? No, here. Damn it, I'm confusing myself. Java, Kotlin. Anyways, yeah, there is a make text. Yeah, there's a standard make text method. So when I say toast.make text, I am calling this class and then calling that method. And you see down here. I don't want to make this pretty advanced. I want to keep it simple, but I'm failing. You see here, they need a context. They need a context, a character sequence, which will be displayed, and a duration. Have I answered your question, or have I just completely made things worse?
You've answered.
Okay. Okay, great. So each time you're making a toast, you're creating a new toast variable. So actually, this could be called dice roll toast. I always don't like just naming it toast. So let me change that to dice rolled toast. Okay, great. So then here also dice rolled toast. Great. So now it's a bit less confusing. Sheila asked what a class is. A class is basically how do you call it? A class. Think of a class as DNA of something. You and I, we are instances of the. Oh, okay, great. I thought you were asking what a class is. All right, so I was asking why you have more than one class. I don't understand. What do you mean more than one class?
You go back. You see that class app main act? Oh, it's okay. Chill. I understood.
Okay, so class main activity is the basic structure of any activity.
Yeah, I've understood.
By the way, know that while you're yelling at me, I am going to put this unedited on YouTube as is. So someone on the internet is going to be watching this and knowing it.
Sorry.
Okay, so next thing we want to do is how do you call it? So we've created a toast. When that button is tapped, a toast will be shown like this. I'm showing you screenshots because running this app and then showing it to you will be here till
we'll kill your PC.
Be humble, Sheila. All right. So next thing we want to do is update that text view when that button is clicked. So in our main activity XML file, which is the layout file. Actually, let me first fix this. Sorry about that. Now it's fixed. In our layout file, the ID is Textview, yes. Great. No, do not rename. So they're telling us to get rid of all this toast nonsense. What I usually do, instead of just deleting that code, I just comment it out. So when you highlight something in Android Studio, just Control and slash, and it's commented out. So now it's out of our way. Next thing we want to do is create a variable for the text view. So we create that in that place, create a new variable called result text view. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete that anyway. Val result text view. Use of type text view. And then we find view by ID. r.id dot text view. The text view too. Did I change it? What's ours called? Text view two. Yeah, text view two. Don't mind that. Again, auto import is not working for me. Probably should have a look at that. I'm just going to do it manually this time. Import Android dot widget dot text view. So you see there are a lot of widgets. Great. So now we've referenced that. After that, we're going to set the text to results text view. dot set text. Is it? No, that's Java. A Java head. Okay, so it's a number, but we're displaying it as a string because we put it in quotes. We want it that way. We're not going to be doing any calculations with it, so a string will work fine. Okay, great. So when we run our app, if we were running our app, we would see what? Why what? Why are we writing it as a string? Because we want to display it as a string. We're not going to do any calculations. We're not going to do any calculations with the string, so it's just going to be a string.
Why?
Well, what do you want us to do? The why, I don't know why. The why is for this example, a string works fine. It could be easily a number, a digit, and we'd be fine. But let's go with what the code lab says we should do for now. Okay, so Sheila, you weren't here. You missed the first bit. So I'm going to be referencing this, and you might be a bit lost. Okay, we'll find you. The add we did this dice class thing in our playground earlier on in an earlier code lab. We're going to do the exact same thing, but this time inside Android Studio. So we can literally just copy this class. It will work fine. There's no Android elements there that would make it break. And they're saying after the last curly brace in the main activity, which is this, we declare another class. So in one class file, you can have as many classes as you want, as long as, you could even have classes inside of classes. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm just copying that code and pasting it there, assuming we still know what they do. But just in case, let me explain this. Class dice, we've created a class dice, and then in our declaration, we want to declare it with a number of sides. So when we're creating an object of class dice, we want to give it a number of sides, 6, 12, 24, whatever it is. And then that dice class also has a function role. And that function, which is down here, the highlighted bit, what it does is it returns an int. So fun role :int. What that means is the return type of the role function is an int, and what it returns is a random number between 1 and the number of sides we specify. And you see how the random here is in yellow? That's how we also know that something is a method or a function in Android Studio. It's usually a different color. So classes start with capital letters when you're calling them anywhere. And then functions or methods are usually made yellow, at least in this theme that I'm using. If I change it to the light theme, it would be something different. That's also a bit of clarity I wanted to give. So what else? That could be private. Could be private. No, it's not telling me that. So again, here the code lab is saying something that is not happening for me. It's saying that it's giving us a warning that num sites could be private, but for me here there is no warning at all. So again, that's the disparity between the time they make these courses and the time when you go through them. So you always, whenever you're going through any course, no matter where you're learning it from, just keep it in mind that things change very fast in Android. I mean, since we started the Android Study Jam, there have been 2 updates to Android Studio in that short space. So things move really fast, and it's easy to get confused by an instruction that is irrelevant or at the time you go through it. So next, we are to create a role dice method. Replace the code Click listener. Okay, so we're going to remove this code and replace it with this code. I'm now just copying and pasting because of time. And notice that there is this red, that's in red. That's because we haven't declared that function role. So to fix that, we're going to create a function roll dice. So when you hover over there, put your cursor there. When you click Alt Enter, usually you get a bunch of actions. So we want to create function roll dice. So it goes ahead and creates us another function. Now inside the roll dice function, we get rid of that to do, and then we create an instance of dice. We create a dice with 6 sides. And notice how here, if I went back to our playground, here, this 6, when val my first dice equals dice 6. Now, sometimes if you're reading through code, if you're not very keen, you might have trouble finding out what that 6 actually stands for. Now, Android Studio, of recent, maybe for about 2 years now, it's been doing this thing where it gives you the actual name of that argument. So in our declaration for the class dice here, we've said that it should take an argument called num sides. So we know that 6 stands for num sides. Little helpful things. Next, we want to roll the dice by calling dice.roll. Wow, roll. Jesus. I see how this becomes confusing. There's dice roll and roll dice. Equals dice dot roll. So another thing when dealing with classes and objects, when you're calling the class, notice how I said that it's always going to be in caps lock. So dice is here always in caps lock. But then the actual object we create starts with a small letter, a lowercase letter. And then finally, we want to find that text view. Where's that text view? I think we found it here. Yeah, we already did that. This is here. Result text view. And cut that out. It doesn't really matter because it's higher up. It's fine. Just paste that down there. And then we're going to set the text for the result text view to dice roll. So result text view dot text, not dot text, equals dice roll. Whoa. Oh, my mistake. Dice roll dot to string. Okay, so Sheila, you asked why we're saving it as a string and not a number. This is it's a lot easier to convert integers to strings than, okay, you can also convert them back and forth, but then it's a lot easier this way to set the text. So we're setting, which is a string. We would get an error if we tried to. We would get an error if we tried to set the text of the dice as a number instead. It will give us an error. So we use toString to change it to a string. That's also another method. I'm trying to hurry up here. So now if we run our app and we tap, I used to have this app installed on my phone. I uninstalled it for space reasons, but if we tap, it would change numbers. Okay, so the final step. I think Vicky is still with us. Is she?
Yeah.
Okay. Final one for the day. I would have loved to finish this chapter today, but then people are also so far behind. I think this gives them time to catch up when I do it in bits and pieces. So adopting good practices again. This is not a must. When you're starting out, it's okay to have your code just all about. But then, if you get into the habit of writing clean code when you're still learning, it becomes part of you when you're doing it professionally. So now, like for me, I used to write code anyhow, and I'm fighting my instincts to just leave things as they are and not clean them up. So it's good that they added this. I don't think this was there when I went through this code lab earlier on. Okay, so we need to condense our code. Concise code means using fewer lines to say the same thing. So you can make a code by condensing your code into shorter numbers. For example, here's the code that sets the click listener for the button. But we can have that all in one line. So here is the code in question. Let's just make that one line, and Studio knows that you're trying to keep it all compact, and will usually keep it out of your way. And also, I could have that way out there, or no, actually, hold on. I could have that like that. What am I trying to do here? I could have, say, that moved all the way that side, and maybe this one, I've moved it way back, and it's just so difficult to read. You could walk away from this code right now, go take a walk for 10 minutes, and come back, and you will find that you don't understand what's happening. But you're the one who wrote that code. So Android Studio has a cool little trick to help us make our code look better. It's Control Alt and L. As you go through this course, as you write a lot more code, and you've learned all the syntax, and you're trying now to gain speed, you learn a lot of these keyboard shortcuts that make your life a lot easier. So Control Alt Shift will realign it. So if I did that, Control Alt Shift, and we're good. Also, it's good practice to add comments to your code to tell your future self. Comments are a love letter to your future self. Yeah, I heard that somewhere last year. You thank yourself very much later on when you come back months later and you're looking at this code and like, oh yeah, this is what this does. You're laughing, but I'm telling you this: you're going to fall in love with your past self for having written these comments. Because now, I'm telling you, you could write. There's this meme online where, when you write your code, you and God know what your code does and why it's working. Then you leave after a bit and you come back, and only God knows why your code is working. And you want to avoid that situation by adding comments. So there are single line comments, which are the double slash, the one that I did, and there are multi-line comments. Now we use them in different spots for different reasons. So here we have an example of a class comment. So this one tells us this activity allows the user to roll the dice and view the result on screen. So that's what our main activity does. We want to write it down, and we want to put that in a comment. So what we do is we come here just above the line above the class declaration. We put slash, double asterisk, and then press enter. You see that? When we do that, it closes it for us, and now we can type in any what was it again? This activity allows the user to roll the dice and see the result on screen. Boom, there we go. What else? The next thing we're going to do is a comment for a method. So there's comments for a class and comments for a method. It's pretty much the same thing, usually, but sometimes you want to keep it short. So function roll dice, again, slash asterisk asterisk, and then roll the dice and update the screen with the result. Great. Marvelous. So when we come back months later, we will know what's happening. Now we also want to add comments for specific lines. Maybe you've done something. Say, for example, what are they using? Create a new dice object. Okay, great. So here we are. We want to tell the user that we are create a new dice object with 6 sides and roll it. Yeah. And then here we have update the screen with the dice roll. Later on, we're going to change it from a number to using images, so our app looks like it's actually rolling a dice. It'll look fairly decent, I must say, when we're done in the next couple of code labs. Okay, so one other use for comments is to remind yourself to do something. Okay, so say for example, I want to also create another dice later on. Maybe I want to have two die on the screen. Two die on the screen. I can set a little reminder for myself. In Android Studio, there's what we call to-dos. How we declare a to-do is // and then to-do in capital letters. To-do, create a second dice. Now, when you're going through your code, it's first of all highlighted a different color from the rest of the comments. And here on the right side of your where the scroll bar is, there's that little blue dash telling you, there's something you need. There's pending work here to do. There's also other spots where you can see it. I haven't run this app, but down here in the run window, in one of the I think in Logcat. No, it's not in Logcat. Yeah, it has its own little. We'll look at what these do in a bit. We should have been going through it, but we couldn't because technology. So you see, when it says it has found one to-do item, and it tells you even the line. So it's on line 35. When you click that, it will take you to exactly where it is. So for the entire project, you are going to be able to find all the to-dos you need. So those are the uses of comments. It's good coding practice to always write comments for your code, but don't overdo it. To-dos are comments, but the special comments in Android Studio that are always there. They're basically pending work. You remind yourself that I need to do this later on. Say I've put here that create a second dice later on. Maybe I'm still setting everything up, and once that's done, I want to create a second dice. But I know I might forget to do that. So I say to do, then I put in the comment. So Android Studio will always remind you that there's some. You haven't understood yet?
Understood.
Have you understood? No?
Understood. I've understood. I've understood.
This is being recorded. Okay, great. So that's been it for our very, very lengthy session today. We lost about 20 minutes, so sorry about that. But thank you all very much for attending. And please take some time out in your day. I know we are all busy with a million things going on. Just take an hour a day. Go through one code lab a day, and by the time school opens next year, you will have a new skill, and you'll also realize a lot of people are not resting in lockdown. People are trying to better themselves, so just go ahead and do that. Yeah, you're all very welcome. So yeah, just block out time, 1 hour a day, or maybe twice or thrice a week. Go through this stuff. I'm always around online. Just shoot me a text, tweet at me. Whatever you're doing, just do all that to reach me. I'm always around to answer your questions. Bye, Sheila. I see you're in a hurry to leave. But yeah, that's been it. Thank you very much. Next week we'll finish this app off.